Hello everyone, Jolene here from Bookworm Adventure Girl. Welcome back, and if you are new, thanks so much for checking out my channel. Please hit subscribe and stick around. Today I am going to be talking about all of the books that I finished in the month of August. And I will start by saying that I am judging the final round of translated fiction for the BookTube prize. And I'm not really able to talk about those books, so I won't be talking about them. But I have finished The Art of Losing by Alice Zeniter and Disquiet by Zulfu Livaneli. And I finished both of those this month. And then I've also finished during the first round, How to Order the Universe by Maria Jose Ferrada. So half of the books for this round are read, and hopefully I will get to the other 3 before the end of September so that we can then vote. So that leaves me with 14 other books to talk about. So as usual, I will begin with the first line from each book, and then we will go from there. So the first book begins. If only you had listened to us, none of this would have happened. And that is from The Whisper Network by Chandler Baker, which has been on my shelf for quite some time. And Chandler Baker is a newer to me author, and I was very surprised to find out how many books that she has written. I am interested in reading The Husbands by her as well. That one sounds good to me. But The Whisper Network is about harassment that women often experience in the workplace and the double standards that exist between men and women and their roles as employees. So this book could easily be part of the Me Too movement and all of that literature. So this story follows 4 women who all work at a company called TrueViv. And the women all have different positions from like high up to the lower paid positions. And then their CEO dies. And the women are concerned that their boss, Ames, will take over that position, which will give him way more power and authority. And that could definitely be a problem, especially since his name is on the list. So this is where the book gets its title. Whisper Network is a list that exists where women can put men's names on it if they have experienced any type of harassment as kind of a heads up to other women in the professional world. So this all reaches a climax when someone else dies and they aren't sure if it was murder or not. And I appreciated what this book is trying to do, which is to bring up issues that women face in professional settings, especially as mothers, and when they are not seen as being as intelligent or as deserving of their roles as the men. So I think in some ways this book tried to take on too many of the issues, or at times picked an issue and then kind of hit you over the head with it over and over and over again, like the challenge of women who are going back to work but are still breastfeeding. It was brought up so many times. So the focus of trying to make a point sometimes took away from character development and story, but the book did do what it set out to do, I think, which was to bring these issues to the forefront and to show them from a variety of perspectives. So having the mystery as part of the story was also okay, but not earth-shattering by any means. The structure of using interviews was also, I don't think, not executed the best because they were kind of scattered throughout and I didn't always know who was being interviewed. So that didn't really work out. At least it didn't work out well for me. So it did do a good job though at explaining what the risks were of these women if they were to speak up and what the consequences were. So this book I think would be good if you are looking to read some Me Too movement literature. If you want to explore the challenges of women's roles in the workplace. And I would say if you like books with office drama, this might be good for you. So the next book begins like this. Forks, Knives, Spoons. And that is the first line in Britt-Marie Was Here by Fredrik Backman, which I read as a buddy read with Kristin from Enter the Book. And I loved reading this with Kristin, and we had some great conversation around this story. I just thought that this was a charming read. It is in my top reads of the month for sure. And I talked a lot about this book already when I did a book pairing. So I won't talk more about this here other than to say that I loved this book and it was a delightful read. And if you want to hear more about it, then I will leave a link in the description box below so you can go check out that video where I kind of give all of the details and all of my thoughts. Next on the list, it begins like this. When I close my eyes, I still see satellites. And this is from Satellite Love by Genki Ferguson. And this is his debut novel. I talked about Genki Ferguson in a video that I highlighted 30 Canadian authors. It was CBC's list, and I first learned about this novel when it was longlisted for Canada Reads this year. And this story is set in Japan, and the main character is 16-year-old Anna Obata, who is an outcast and made fun of at school. She's kind of a loner, and what makes this book unique is that it is about a relationship between Anna and a satellite that she names Leo, and this relationship with Leo becomes a coping mechanism for her, I think. I didn't love this book, but there were elements about it that I did like. So for me, the relationship she had with the boy at her school, who was also different and outcast, was so much better than the satellite relationship. The book kind of explores some heavier topics like loneliness and mental illness in a really unique way. And I'm sure that there were things in this story that I missed, but I'm glad that I read it, and I would definitely try another novel by this author. So I think that this would be good if you enjoy books that kind of explore relationships with other non-human beings. If you are interested in a different perspective on mental illness, and if you are willing to kind of check out a new author who I think has something to bring to the table. So these next two books, I kind of went back and forth about what I would rate them, like 3, 3.5, 4. So these are kind of middle of the road books for me, and that might be an unpopular opinion for one, maybe even both of them. I'm not sure, but the first one begins, in early February 2006, I was 47 and at the lowest point of my life. And this is from Beneath a Scarlet Sky by Mark T. Sullivan. And this is the book that I read with the Up to No Good book club. And it is based on a true story, and it follows the main character, Pino Nella, who is 17 when the story begins in 1943. And then it goes until May of 1945. And I thought that I would love this book because it is about a part of the war that little has been written about, and that's the Nazi occupation of Italy and the Catholic Underground Railroad. And it talks about places in Italy that I know and love. And here's the thing, the story is really, really good. So why am I hesitant to say that this is amazing and I loved it? Well, I think it's the approach. When I read a book, I want to read the book. And there is a lot of the story at the beginning and at the end about how the author approached writing the book and the story. And I'm sure this is very important to the author and that it was, their experience, but it is not important to me to spend pages upon pages telling us about it. So I just wanted the story. And I really liked Pino. I instantly felt that he was a charismatic character and that he was going to be a character that I would root for. But I can't say that all of the story was believable. So beginning with his love interest, Anna, and how instantaneous it all is for him, and there were just a few things that just didn't sit right and didn't feel authentic. So I loved the storyline, especially once Pino becomes a driver and ultimately a spy. He has to overcome people who think he has betrayed his country, and The relationship that he has with General Layers, I thought was very well done. And I guess in the end, I just think that the book could have been so much better with a little bit of editing, because the story is there and it is a good one. So this would be good if you were interested in stories based during the Second World War, and if you like stories based on, or I guess inspired by, true events and true people. So this next book begins. The night Afia Archer was born into the musky heat of Fantaland, a fire raged through the woods just outside her father's compound. And this is from Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi. And I know this is a very well-loved book, and I will say, like Beneath a Scarlet Sky, I didn't love it, but there were many elements that I did enjoy. So this one did grab me at the beginning. In the first chapter, for sure, like so much happens, and it really sets the scene for what's to come. So this is a story that begins with two half-sisters, Afia from the first line, who marries a white man, and Afia, who is enslaved and eventually is taken to America. And then this is where the story starts, and it then follows 300 years of where these two lines of women end up. So normally, I love books about families, and I love many of the topics in this book. But for me, it all got lost in the structure. So each chapter is told from someone in the next generation, and it alternates between the two lines of women. So I found that very distracting, and it just wasn't this continuous story, and it took away from the connections for me. So I appreciate that it was trying to show the history and the differences that came from these two lives, but the execution fell flat for me. So the book would be good, I think, for anyone who is content with those glimpses into a story, wants to read about the history of the slave trade, and is good with alternating perspectives. Next up is a story that begins, "When I left my office that beautiful spring day, I had no idea what was in store for me." And this is the first line from Where the Red Fern Grows by Wilson Rawls, which I read as part of the read-along that was hosted by AJ from AJ Dunn Reads and Writes. And I had never read this book before. I had seen the movie, and I knew that this was AJ's favorite book of all time. And I thought, what better person to read it with? And I think that this is one of those books and a story that holds a lot of nostalgia for people. And I still want to rewatch the movie. So Billy Coleman is a young boy that I immediately fell in love with. I think it was how strong he was in his convictions. He wanted to purchase 2 dogs, and he did everything that he could to make that happen. Even though it took like a couple of years, he was determined. And then when he got his 2 hunting dogs, Old Dan and Little Ann, Billy creates a beautiful bond with them, and like Billy, these dogs are passionate and loyal. And then following along their adventures, you kind of know that this is a sad book, but I still wanted to read it. And I loved how the grandfather and even Billy's father were proud of him and supported him in his adventures. And I also liked how it ended with kind of a message that, everything happens for a reason. So this book would be for anyone who, is already a fan of this classic, if you enjoy adventure stories with dogs, and if you are prepared to cry over a couple of pups and their boy. So thanks again to AJ for hosting this read-along and letting me be part of it. Up next, here we go. Grounding your wedge in a bunker is normally a 2-stroke penalty. And this is from one of my favorite Canadian authors, Poles Apart by Terry Fallis. The main character in this story is Everett, whose father has a stroke while golfing, and Everett moves closer to be able to help care for his father. While he's caring for his father, he begins a blog to discuss feminist issues, I guess, and topics. So for a bit, I was like, where is all of this going? And I'm not sure about this, but I'm so glad that I stuck with it because, like all of Terry Fallis's books, he brings it all together very well with some humor along the way. And there's a bit of irony in the story, and the blog ends up going from like very few subscribers to just blowing up overnight. And Everett is trying to keep his identity a secret, but that's not easy to do. And I love how the book gets its title. I thought that was quite clever. So even though this was not my favorite Terry Fallis book, it was still worth reading. And I would say that this would be for anyone who likes a lighthearted book, a bit of humor, if you like interesting takes on feminism. And I will just say that if you haven't read Terry Fallis before, he's a lot of fun. Okay, next, it's been 3 months since Owen left. And this is from The Good Sister by Sally Hepworth, who was a new author to me. And I've already mentioned that I really enjoyed this book, and I will definitely be reading more by her. I actually devoured this story. It's about twin sisters, Rose and Fern, and Rose has her life figured out and in many ways is Fern's keeper. And Fern seems to be more fragile and needy. She has sensory processing issues and she needs rules and routine, and Rose kind of helps to keep Fern sheltered from the chaos of the real world. So the story is told in alternating perspectives from Rose and Fern's point of view. And Rose's storyline is told from her journal entries, and we get flashbacks of the twins' lives and how they were connected and really watched out for each other early on. But something horrible happened when they were young that they have kept secret all these years, and it may be their undoing. So I was pleasantly surprised how quickly I was drawn into this story. I liked the characters and the character development. Having both sisters' perspectives was brilliant. And even though I figured it out early on, I was still interested in following through with the story and kind of seeing how it played out. So this would be a good story for anyone who likes dual narratives, unreliable narrators, stories about twins or sisters, and if you want a bit of a twist, this would be good. Up next is, when Hazel grew up and moved out of the prairies, she would learn from movies and the news that small towns were supposed to be poor and dying. And this is from A Dream of a Woman by Casey Plett, and this is a short story collection. And this has been on my radar because it was long listed for the Gilbert Prize last year. And what links all of the short stories is that they are all about the lives of transgender women. And I thought that the writing was really good, and I will definitely read more from Casey Plett. I kind of have my fingers crossed for a novel, so we'll see if that happens. And if I had to choose my favorite story of the collection, I think I would most likely go with Hazel and Christopher. I thought that was a well done and well written story. So this is definitely a collection to check out if you like short stories and if you are interested in stories about transgender women specifically. Okay, so next, here we are. So this starts, "We didn't believe when we first heard because you know how church folk can gossip." And this is a great first line, I think, from The Mothers by Bennett, which was is her debut novel and the first book that I've read by her. And I enjoyed this book. I liked the writing, and I liked the way it gave so many perspectives on motherhood and really explored all of its complexities. The main character in this story is Nadia, whose mother has died, and she is in a relationship with Luke, and their relationship changes after a decision is made. And then Aubrey is Nadia's best friend, who is also part of this story and this mix. And then there are the mothers. And the mothers are basically like a collective voice of the elder women in the church, which I thought was an interesting way to kind of tell some of the story. So this is a coming of age story in a small community, and it shows us how our decisions can have lasting effects. And I think that this one, on a reread, I think I would get even more out of it because it feels so multi-layered. So I think that this would be good for anyone who enjoys coming of age stories, likes the theme of motherhood, and likes stories set in small communities. Okay, there's a few more to go here, and this next one is a real doorstop, and it begins. In December 1962, Sylvia Plath moved into William Butler Yeats' old house. And this is from Red Comet by Heather Clark. This is huge, and because of that, I read it, and then sometimes I also listen to the audio because the book is really, really heavy, so like physically heavy. So this book is one that I have come to appreciate more and more once I finished it. This book is very well researched, and I feel that it gives a very comprehensive look into Sylvia Plath's life and work. There were times that I felt like I was being told like every single day of her life, almost like, reading a daily diary. And there were times that I thought, do I need to know all of this detail? Because it is very detailed. But there's also something that I really appreciated about that. It was like no stone was left unturned. And I learned a lot about Sylvia Plath, and it was interesting having it all laid out for you. So there were definitely patterns and lines that could be drawn from her life and her work. And I have more respect, I think, for her as a writer. And I thought the mental health and her death by suicide was handled well too. So Heather Clark seems to have tried to be as unbiased, I think, as she could be, and to present all of the perspectives that she could. So this is definitely a novel for anyone who is a Sylvia Plath fan and, wants the entire scoop. But I think that it might also appeal to people who are not huge fans, who are just learning about Sylvia Plath, but who are interested in even nonfiction books about people in general. But yeah, be forewarned that the book is heavy, it is detailed, and it is very time-consuming. This next book is another one that's been on my shelf, unread, for way too long, and it begins. I received a letter from his daughter the other day, and this is from City of Girls by Elizabeth Gilbert, and I loved this story. First of all, it takes place in New York, beginning in the 1940s, and I love New York, so check. It has a strong female protagonist, check. Vivian Morris is 95 years old, and she has been asked a question. What were you to my father? And in order to answer that question, she looks back on her life, beginning when she was 19, had flunked out of college, so her parents, bizarrely, but sent her to live with her Aunt Peg in Manhattan. And this would be really her education, because Aunt Peg introduces young Vivian to the theater life. And the story has a great cast of quirky and down-to-earth characters, also check. And it has the unexpected, which I also love, and which is why I ended up giving this 5 stars. Vivian at 19 just wants to be accepted. She wants to belong, and she wants to be loved. And the women, the showgirls that she meets, and the people that they introduce Vivian to, help her explore her own sexuality, to learn about love, and to recognize true love when it comes along. And I just thought that this was a fun and exciting book, but it has all the things I love. But most importantly, it's the real story, which gives it and Vivian some depth. So this is a book, I think, for anyone who likes books set in New York City and likes stories about theater. If you enjoy a variety of characters and a great storyline, then I think this might be for you. Okay, we have 2 more to go here. This next one starts, Jane was driving east. And this is from We Jane by Canadian author Aimee Wall. And this was longlisted for the Gilbert Prize last year as well, and I had started it, but I wasn't getting along with it. So I decided to put it aside and try again another time. And this time I got through it, but I can't say that I am a fan. The topic of the book is very timely. It is about caring for women who want to have or who have had an abortion, and it is about an underground movement, and the 2 main characters, Martha and Jane, end up going to Newfoundland to help with this movement. So this fell very flat for me. I never connected to the characters. I felt like it was very bland and I just couldn't get into it. But if you are interested in this underground movement, then maybe this would be for you. But I have a feeling that there might be something else out there that would maybe be better. And the final book begins, behind the clouds of the new monsoon, the ancient mainframe Chang rolls too fast across the sky. And this is from The Tiger Flew by Canadian author Larissa Lai. And this is a dystopian sci-fi novel. And I know that most of you already know that normally sci-fi is not my thing. But I keep trying every once in a while. I try to go outside my comfort zone. So it probably won't surprise you when I say that I'm not really sure what this book is about. And I'm not really sure everything that happened in this book. So here's what I know. There's a flu. And I didn't just get that from the title. The world is a world of women, and there are mother doubles, I think it is, and there are women called starfish who can regenerate body parts. And this flu becomes a real threat, and in order to save everyone, they need to find someone who is a starfish. And then at some point, there are men who take some of the women. Okay, so I really don't know how to describe this book or this story, but I know that I was intrigued by this world that I didn't understand. So I'm going to say that this book is for anyone who likes dystopian and sci-fi books, and anyone who enjoys being in a completely different world. And if you've read this, or if you do read it, and you can describe this book better than me, which is probably everyone else, then please tell me what was this about exactly. So those are the books that I finished in August. So please let me know if you have read any of these, or if you are interested in reading any of them. Also, let me know what are some of your favorite books, or least favorite books, I guess, that you read in August. I'd love to hear all about those as well. I look forward to chatting with you in the comments. Thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and don't forget to make every day an adventure.